up for our next TED-like talk.
Okay, all right, let's start with Hrithik Roshan. Now, what happened was, I didn't know there's a movie called Agnipath. I didn't, till August 22nd this year. How did I discover the movie? I was on Spotify, and I typed in Bollywood Top Mush. And a playlist showed up, as it does for all of us. All-time best Bollywood songs. And Agnipath's song, Abhi Mujh Mein Kahin, was on that playlist. And I went nuts. I love that song. I obsessed over it. I listened to it all day long, all week long. My kids were fed up. My husband was fed up. But it hit a nerve. Because of that song, I watched the movie that weekend. And that was the first time I watched Agnipath. Then I realized there's an older Agnipath and all of those other things, because then I Googled and went down that rabbit hole. But when I come onto Spotify, this is how I search for music. I put in a mood, and sometimes I put in a genre. And I'm okay with this being subjective, as in how you interpret Bollywood mush and how I interpret Bollywood mush can be different, and that's cool. In fact, that's why I like Spotify, that I can put in my keywords and somebody else's interpretation of these words can show up, and my songs are forever fresh. My playlists are forever fresh. This is the kind of Spotify user I am. So, if I had to encapsulate the kind of user I am, this is me on Spotify. I use Spotify to listen to music that aligns with my mood, while keeping the songs fresh, right? The freshness is important to me. Otherwise, I could have downloaded a playlist and just listened to the same thing again and again. Before Spotify, I used to curate playlists from friends and listen to them on my VLC player. That's what I used to do. And I switched to Spotify because, well, here I could put in my mood, my genre, and get fresh playlists, right? In fact, all my playlists that I got from my friends, poached from them, were also labeled by mood. So there was a gym playlist, there was a sappy Bollywood playlist. That is how I organized my music even then. So it makes sense as the kind of user that I am. I'm a moody kind of listener. This is my husband's relationship with Spotify. It's a complicated relationship, right? And the complication is because he uses Spotify to listen to specific artists. And he wants the minimum amount of effort to find those artists. He wants to type in UXINDIA'24, one of his favorite artists, and he wants to see all the albums of UXINDIA'24 pop up. He would be even happier if latest albums and oldest albums of his artists showed up on Spotify, some things that he can't easily find on YouTube, let's say. Before Spotify, he used to use iTunes because he's a Mac user, I'm a Windows user. But he switched to Spotify. This is the complication, because I forced him to switch to Spotify. And now he uses Spotify, and we have a family account and all the fun stuff. Okay, so why did I tell you these two things? Because, you know, when we think about personas, we get so bogged down in like 32-year-old housewife, you know, who wants this, and 45-year-old senior professional who wants this. Rubbish. What are you going to do? Are you designing for 42-year-olds versus 41-year-olds versus 35-year-olds? No. You're designing for the hero. You're designing for someone who wants to get from here to there. Taapsi wants music that aligns with her mood and stays fresh. If you can solve for that, there are many Taapsis. In fact, a lot of you nodded your heads. When I said that I'm a moody listener, you all were like, oh shit, that's also what I do, right? If you can understand my story, who I am, actually, not who I am, I take that back. What I want and where I want to go, you will be able to design for the needs of a big swath of people. Not only that, the story of the hero will come to life, right? When I told you my story, suddenly it all clicked, right? You're like, VLC makes sense, playlists by labels make sense, why Spotify makes sense. Now the whole thing makes sense together. That is what you want your persona to do. Whether you make the persona or your manager makes a persona and hands it to you, the story, the journey of the hero needs to make sense to you. And if that story makes sense, I bet you, my friends over here, you will come up with innovative ideas to satisfy that hero outside of the features and the feature mandates that you've been given right now, because you got the hero's essence. So I'm all about practice. I'm a practicing anthropologist, which means all my theory, I want to leave you with tools and templates and frameworks that I've been mulling on, so you can do something with it and tomorrow give it a try. So, maybe some of you have done user interviews. Has anybody actually spoken to users, done one-on-ones? How many have done? Okay, great. So about half the crew over here. Excellent. Now, user interviews, I do this for a living. I have a PhD in anthropology, so I've been talking to consumers for over 12 years now and written about it. The problem with user interviews is there's a lot of noise mixed with signal, right? Because part of the user interview is just building rapport. Tell me about yourself, because you want them to open up so that they can tell you what it is that you need to know. But as a designer, it's a lot of information to take in, right? What you guys want is the right amount of information to act on, to design for, to test with. That's what you want. So how do you get there? This is one template that might help you. It helps me, and it helps my team. When you do an interview, try to break it down into just these core elements. If you can build out this statement, then you've this is what I call the progress statement, the hero's progress statement. Where does the hero want to go? Where are they now? Where were they in the past? What changed? And why? So this is the progress statement in a nutshell, so to speak. So I'm going to give you some examples to put this into context. Ashish shops on Myntra. Action. To find deals, the goal. Across a wide category of products, the value add, right? He wants it across a wide category of products. In the past, he used Amazon, but he switched to Myntra when he switches to Myntra when he's not happy with Amazon selections. So whenever the category selection doesn't satisfy him on Amazon is his inflection moment. It's when he switches. Now you've understood Ashish a little bit, right, about what he wants. Let's do another one, Seema. You'll notice it's not just about products all the time, it's also about experiences and behaviors, the progress statement. Because not always is someone needing to use something, they just want to do something to get somewhere. Seema saves 15% of her salary, action, to fund her travel needs, goal. And prefers to do this in the form of SIPs, value add, because there are many ways she could do this. She prefers SIPs. In the past, she never saved separately for travel, but she switched. Inflection point, because Zerodha made it so easy to start SIPs. You understood what Seema wants? Makes sense now? Okay. As a designer, there's a lot that you can do with these individual points that I'm listing out. Action clearly tells you what are they doing on the product, right? What are they product or what service they are achieving? What is the action that they're taking? Goal tells you where they want to go. This is your North Star. The goal is not a task, guys. Goal is not, I want to search for this playlist. That is a goal. I want to find music, that's a task. I want to find music that appeals to my mood, right, and stays fresh is a goal and a value-added goal. Right? So goals are bigger than tasks and they're bigger than jobs. I'm going to come to that in a second. Right? The value add here, keeping songs fresh for Taapsi and for Mark, putting in minimum effort to do so. Related action is what were they doing before this action? As an anthropologist, understanding past behavior is fundamental to how I was trained to look at the world. You see, we all, whether you've actively thought about it or not, have always made decisions that make sense to us. They are rational in our mind. And even if they're not in your mind, someone will look at you and say, Deepika, you've always done this. You're this kind of person. Right? Because we are fundamentally making decisions that are cohesive. They make sense. So understanding the past for me is the answer to predicting the future, which is why related action is important for me in the progress statement. What were they doing in the past will indicate to you what they are likely to do in the future, much better than asking them things like willingness to pay and willingness to use. That's rubbish, right? People can say anything to you in an interview, but you understand what they did in the past, and that is a much better indicator of what they're likely to do, right? Often what people say and what people do is not the same thing, which you also know as designers, right? Finally, boosters and obstacles. These are things, boosters are things, they could be environmental factors, they could be characteristics, they could be influencers who move you in the direction of your goal. And inhibitors or obstacles are things that will hold you back. Matt Wallert is a behavioral scientist, and he uses inhibiting pressures and promoting pressures to talk about the same thing, about changing user behavior. Says that to understand behavior, you need to understand what are the pressures moving that person in one direction, and what are some things that will hold them back. The booster for Mark was his wife's recommendation. That is why he did it. He didn't use Spotify because of some amazing feature set. He switched to Spotify because I told him, right? And if you want to get to him and people like him, you need the wife, the spouse, or the referral. The influencer in this person's life is what that is telling you, right? So think of boosters not just as features that are moving people along, but also influencers and factors in the network that could, in the environment that could play a role. Now that I've broken down the progress statement to you, now let's come to this idea of a persona, okay? All I did in this persona was represent the progress statement, if you see there. On the left side is the value-added goal that we already talked about for a user like Taapsi on Spotify. The moody listener who wants to listen to fresh playlists for every mood. Everything on the right side must support the goal, the value-added goal on the left. If it doesn't support the goal or take that story further, the hero's story further, please discard it. No age, no gender, no location. Do you see any of that here? No. Not relevant. Is that relevant for my mood search? No. My personality, 40% cheerful, 30% sad. Is that meaningful? Not relevant. What is important is, what is my lived experience? Let's break down the right side. What is my lived experience in the context of music? Not the fact that I like chess or I read a book on the weekend. Not relevant. But in the context of music, what do I do? Lived experience is present experience and past experience, not future, not likely. It's what have they already lived? How are they already living? Right? This is how I'm living. I stream music everywhere. I'm likely to be adventurous in my music taste. I'm not fussy about artists, songs, albums, nothing. I want inspiration. I'm only about the music, not even lyrics. Right? You'll write down your lived experience. Inflection point. For you to understand this user a little bit, what changed and when. Tells you a little bit more about the story. Taapsi changed from VLC to Spotify because another chance to keep her music fresh. And boosters and obstacles that you will understand by doing user interviews, right? Or looking at data that you've already collected. What are things that move Taapsi along? What are things that will hold her back from a tool like Spotify? Not hold her back from the goal. What will hold her back from using a solution, right? What will hold me back from using Spotify is if there was a limited playlist collection. Every time I typed in Bollywood Mush, if I'm only getting 3 playlists, I will bounce, or I'll go back to my old player, right? Or bug my friends, whatever. Here's another one, progress statement. Pragya bought an Apple Watch to track her health stats in the most accurate way possible. She'd never owned a wearable before, but she bought the watch after she watched a documentary on, sad given today's context and what's happened with EY, and watched a documentary on early deaths related to stress, right? This is the progress statement for someone like Pragya. Same thing, I put it into a persona chart, right? The numbers ninja. She wants to track her health stats in the most reliable way possible, and I've done the same thing. Right side is lived experience around health. What matters to her, or wearables, if she was wearing wearables, but in this case she hasn't before this. Inflection point, what changed? Boosters and obstacles, what will come in the way and what is she already doing right now? I mean, what will move her along that journey? Everything that you see over here, let me mention a couple of things here. Everything you see here, I call this a consolidation slide. This is you consolidating the story of the hero, right? You're putting all the pieces together from your user interviews and you're creating this consolidation slide. But I'm here to talk about impact personas. This is part one, putting the story together. This doesn't really talk about impact in a direct way. Impact comes at two levels. User impact, what will move Pragya along, what will move Taapsi along, and business impact, what is important to the business, right? That's where we want to go with these personas. So this was consolidation. I want to talk about what you do with personas in order to make them meaningful to internal stakeholders. Internal stakeholders are you guys, right? To the designers, the product managers, to your bosses, to your seniors, to your team members. How can you do something with these personas in order to take action? So let me tell you what I did here. Remember the goal statement. Fresh playlist for every mood. I broke down that goal statement now into a job. The Jobs to be Done framework is by an innovation expert called Tony Ulvik. You should look it up. I find it really valuable. What is so interesting about his approach is he says, think of your product as being hired by the user to do something for him or her. Think of the product as being hired by the user. What have I hired Spotify to do for me? That is a job. I've hired Spotify to do many things towards my end goal. Your job as a designer is to move the user using small design interventions towards their goal. Those design interventions I'm calling jobs, or rather, Tony has called jobs. I'm putting them here in this framework. If you can identify what are those small steps that someone needs to take, you can design interventions to solve for those jobs in order to achieve the big goal. So you understand the what linked to the why through this. So to quickly search for a playlist tagged by mood is my job, right? That is the job now. I linked that to user habits. Now I can talk about what is the user likely to do now that I have this job laid out. Likely to use the search bar, likely to use type or maybe voice in order to quickly find the song playlist that I'm looking for. Now I can next level talk about product touch points. Now that I know what the habit is likely to be, what is the user touching? And the green box is the fun stuff. It's what can you now do with it? Where does the impact lie? Impact could be design interventions. You could list out, oh, this is what we need to do. Build a search bar. Maybe you didn't have a search bar before. That becomes a design intervention. Or it could be what I call, what Tony and other innovation experts call gains, right? Which is what can you do, or delightful experiences, as you guys have heard. What can go above and beyond the pain point or the job to be done to creating a more holistic bonus experience, so to speak. That's a product gain. But you cannot get to the green box without first getting to the other three in that order. Because now it all makes sense. Why this gain? Just like you guys struggle with why this feature. It will now make sense if you lay it out like this. So here's another one, another job to be done for me, to have multiple genre options for my mood. If I'm just interested in cafe music, I want cafe music jazz. I would love cafe music, ambient, or cafe music Bollywood. Could be anything. User habit likely to save certain playlists if they hit her nerve for these different genre options. Product touch points, favorite, the favorite button. Product gain, here's an example of mood genre filter. Right? You could come up with anything. This is where you'll sit with your team and deliberate. This is user impact. But you can take this personas, once you understand the user, shouldn't stop at the design team. What you build should be so universal, because it's about universal users. Anyone in your org should be able to use it. In fact, I did that. I designed personas that were used by sales, marketing, and design, because ultimately everyone's talking to the same types of users. No, it's a business. Business is all targeting the same group. So campaign ideas, again, you can generate campaign ideas for the same thing, multiple genre moods, because you fully understood the cycle. Now you can roll out a whole campaign idea on mood favorites. Totally would hit the nerve around multiple genres, which will totally sync up with the goal statement. This is just another way. I'm just telling you that you can take this out, put it into Excel, sit with your team, workshop it, and start building out the table. What are all the jobs to be done for the value-added goal that we've defined? What are the user habits linked to that? What are the product touch points linked to that? What are the gains? Right? So you can take this out into Miro, Mural, Excel, whatever you use, and keep building out the columns on the right. Right? While keeping everything else standard on the left, because that will not change for the user. Core tenets of the IP, the impact persona framework. You must have value-added goals. Goals are not enough. We all want to listen to music on Spotify. If that is your goal statement, then every user is the same. The value add comes because I want music for my genre, and Mark wants music for specific artists. We both are on Spotify to find music. That is why value-added goals is what you need to start with. Everything in your consolidation slide must support your goal statement, your value-added goal. If it doesn't, discard it. It's noise. You do not need it. You need to unpack past behavior. I've already talked about this in order to get to the present and the future. And last thing, your brand does not actually matter in the consolidation slide. I happen to talk about Spotify, but maybe this was iTunes, an iTunes designer doing research with people who are listening to music, realizing someone switched to VLC and Spotify, and the question is, why not Apple? Why not iTunes? Your brand is not important. What is important is what was the hero trying to do and what enabled him along the journey. And if that sparks ideas about how you can usurp that user, great. But nobody cares about an individual brand. They want to get to somewhere. And if your product serves that need, they will use you. 4 things if you're going to integrate impact personas into your org. Design, which means design your research, understand what it is that you want to understand, and think of the segments that you want to talk to, the people that you want to talk to. This is super important. You want diversity of people to talk to. People who love your brand, people who hate your brand, people who've never heard about your brand. You need to understand what's happening in the space of music and listening to music, right? Please don't discount this step. My company is built on segmentation and the right people, because the right people will shape the information that you collect, which is why it's super important to pay attention to that. Discover is actually collecting data and understanding what people are doing. Develop is developing the progress statements and developing the template, finally, out of the progress statements. Remember, for every interview, write down a progress statement. You may have 10, 15 progress statements because you spoke to 10, 15 users. You are not building 10, 15 personas, not more than 3 to 5. That is too much for anyone to handle. You're not designing for more than 5 types of users, right? You can't design for 15, 20 types of users. You have to synthesize your progress statements into buckets, and you will realize it's not hard to do. As human beings, when you're using a product, there are only so many reasons to use Spotify. There aren't really more than 3 to 5 reasons to use Spotify, right? So your job is to put them together into maximum 3 to 5 personas, build out your persona template. Last step is decode, where you build out your framework and think of the interventions, run those interventions, see if they move the needle, and otherwise come back to the drawing board. Personas are living documents. The more you talk to users, the more you learn about their lived experience, the more you learn about their boosters and their obstacles. Keep updating. Business impact comes when you've built your 3 to 5 personas, you go to your bosses, stakeholders sit together and decide, of these 5, let's prioritize 2. Because this persona makes sense to us from a business lens, and this persona B and persona D, let's start there. Excellent. Once there's alignment on which group you want to start with, you can start building out the transformation slide, the jobs to be done, the touch points, the interventions, right? So this is how you're able to bring user impact and business impact through the conversation of personas and heroes and hero journeys. Last thing, I run interviews for a living. What are some questions that you should ask if you want to get to some of these answers, right? So here are some questions that you should absolutely have when you're running an interview. Why did you decide to use the product? That's a goal, right? What did you expect out of this interaction is a value add, right? What were they seeking out of this? Did the product deliver on X, Y, or why not? This could tell you about inflection points. What changed? What dropped? Walk me through all the steps the last time you did this. Lived experience. Also user habits. Can you think of other instances when you've tried to do this? Very important. Don't get bogged down in your product. Where else, how else did they try to do this? You may realize that that competition for Notion is actually a notepad. And it's got nothing to do with Notion's competition. It's, like, or the competition for a jewelry brand is actually the local jeweler. It had nothing to do with a direct competition in that space. Understand what did people try to do themselves through jugaad, even to try to achieve something. It'll tell you what they're after and what they're willing to live with. If I'm okay manually using Excel and typing everything into a cell, that's your competition, right? You have to solve for that. You have to compete with that. What was that experience like? If it was negative, another great question, how did you try to manage the situation? Oh, I tried Excel sucked, like I spent so much time doing it. So what did you try to do? I don't know, I tried going online, seeing if there's some way to automate certain things, but that just got me down another rabbit hole. I'm not great with numbers. I left it. That's great to know that they are not a numbers person. That I only understood by asking them, oh shit, Excel sucks. How did you try to fix it? The answers were also not satisfactory. There wasn't an easy way for this person to automate certain processes. And finally, did your efforts work, which tied to what I said. So keep these questions in mind. If you get to at least this, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to build out your progress statements and eventually lead you towards a persona and then impact from there. Thank you so much.